We're talking about the most controversial thing right now.
Right, pineapple on pizza, right?
Correct. Uh, Pineapple on pizza is okay, but if a data center made the pizza, would that be okay?
That's a good question.
So, what's your feelings on data centers, Matt?
uh, I think they're a double-edged sword. I think for people like me in the tech space, they're great. Um, there could be a lot of downsides, a lot of upsides. They create jobs, which is great, but um, there's also the potential pollution issues, noise pollution, all kinds of stuff.
At this point, can we even live without them?
At this point, a lot of the growing and progressive world would suffer without them.
I think the reality is to data centers is they're already here.
This is true.
I mean, just in Ohio alone, there are 207 data centers that exist in Ohio.
Right.
So, do you think people, when they say ban data centers, they mean get rid of the ones we currently have plus anything new?
I mean, that would be quite a tall ask. A lot of their day-to-day comforts would suddenly cease to exist, unfortunately.
Do you think they know specifically what the reality would be without a data center today?
I don't think a lot of people do realize just how much of their stuff relies on them. Um, uh, I think there's a lot of room for education there.
You know, yourself as a tech professional,
Mm-hmm.
you've been providing IT to thousands of people over your career. Do you think that a lot of it's just based on misinformation?
I think so. A lot of if misinformation and yeah, generally not understanding what a data center is. You know, we still talk about the cloud. They may not quite point to data centers. They don't quite understand what all's going on there.
I mean, I know that you always try to be respectful, but of your general user, do you think they really understand like how connected they are to things that are that massive?
No, I don't think there's quite the connect. It even took me a while to make that connect. Coming into this field, it was quite eye opening to understand just how that all connects.
So I always try to relate this to the coming of trains or the coming of electricity.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of resistance then
Yes.
to those. And we don't have time to get into the historical pieces of trains and electrical infrastructure. But in a lot of ways, the misinformation and the scary piece of data centers seems to be very similar to what I read on trains or electricity. Do you think that we're going to create some type of digital Amish man in the future?
Potentially, that's very interesting. I was always equating it to like the steel mills, things of that nature, where when they created this great economical boom, and when we decided to do away with them, they were bad for environment, bad for health purposes, because there was no regulations and things of that nature. Um, then a lot of things suffered.
True.
So to get rid of them, to ban them, to would cause quite a disruption.
I almost equate it a little bit to what has happened with nuclear power plants. Like we stopped building nuclear power plants,
Mm-hmm.
and we aren't building them currently. There is a lot of talk of building nuclear power plants because of the risk that is associated with
Mm-hmm.
them. You know, the 3 Mile Island incident or
Mm-hmm.
the things that have happened. Japan seems to have a lot of issues with nuclear power plants. Um, so on a similar note, a data center I think is kind of seen on a similar level as a nuclear power plant, where it is very volatile. Whether it's a foreign nation tries to blow it up, or it's a thing that hurts the environment, is it worth the risk of having it? And we have enough already. We already have enough nuclear power plants. We already have enough data centers. But do we truly have enough data centers? And if we create more data centers, we'll probably need more nuclear power plants. So some of these you start seeing connecting the dots here of, I think the side that doesn't want data centers isn't crazy by any means. but also can they slow it down?
I think they'll be able to slow it down a little bit, but maybe move it as these regulations come into play. I was watching a documentary on data centers, and it was definitely geared negative. A lot of homeowners being upset that they're coming into these zones that are loosely zoned as commercial. I think a lot of it's going to start pushing data centers a little away from certain locations that are residential, which is, in my opinion, good.
Well, it definitely would not be ideal to have a data center in a residential neighborhood, but that's a lot of how the zoning has worked in some of these smaller communities. It doesn't fit in any one category.
Right.
And so the best thing that some of these smaller municipalities have done is say data centers now belong in industrial zones, which makes a lot of sense because it's probably an old steel mill there or
Mm-hmm.
something like that that has come and gone and they have empty property available.
Right. Something that would have been producing way more of a toxic environment than what a data center is probably going to produce.
Well, there's a lot of information around that about data centers and how it pollutes our water supply
Mm-hmm.
and how it uses too much water. Is that all true? Do data centers just suck the lakes dry?
I don't think it sucks the lakes dry. I think there's definitely a lot of extra water use. Definitely a pull on the power grid when you consider all the backup generators that are on these things, and their HVAC systems. I'm hoping that it pushes us to find more efficient, clean energy. So becoming more efficient with our solar and our wind. But who knows?
Yeah, I don't think that a lot of people have hope that a billionaire is going to come in and build a data center in their little town and say, "Oh, we care about the residents as much as the residents care about themselves." And if they can suck all the power out, they're not really concerned as long as their data center runs.
Yeah.
And I think that is the unfortunate reality of it is there's a little bit of we have to have the data centers to exist, but at what cost and how do we navigate through that to protect our own communities? I think there's an economic risk there though too. If you look at towns in the Midwest, a lot of them are there because of the trains.
Mm-hmm.
If you did not have the trains, you did not have the towns. Even to the point, I've talked to some train people, people who operate the railroad, and they're like, "Yep, we know that you're there because of us, and you better respect us because of that." And they kind of feel a little bit, empowered by that. And I think in a lot of ways, the same thing is going to happen with data centers in 100 or 200 years. Going to be, yep, your town's there because you let a data center get built there. And the other ones are going to get passed on by because they don't have a data center, just like the trains.
That'll be interesting.
Well, you won't be here. Well, maybe
No.
you will. So
who knows? But I don't know. I plan to go up and help colonize Mars. So
so let's talk about that. Why don't we put more data centers in space, like Mars or the moon?
that's a very interesting question. I think the connectivity would be part of it. Would be part of an issue. I know we have Starlink. We have these great technologies that allow us to bounce signals and data massive amounts of mileage. But we're not there yet to build systems up there. I mean, going up and managing that would be ridiculously expensive. I mean, this could be a thing 100, 200 years from now. I mean, who knows how technology is going to grow in 5 years. But I mean, I could totally see a floating citadel of data just floating around out there.
Like orbiting the Earth?
It'd be interesting.
Do you think? I mean, there's already a ton of satellites and a ton of space junk up there. Is that's gonna muddy our night sky, isn't it? Like I got this block of data center floating above my head now, going. I don't know how fast I go. Pretty fast up there.
You'd have to orbit something.
Well, they could build it straight on the moon, couldn't they?
Oh, then mess with our moon.
Right, exactly. These are all like pushbacks, I think, that are legitimate too. Is there a speed challenge to have connectivity that far out, you think?
I think so. I think right now we're very limited. Starlink is definitely in the right direction for those kind of connections. Uh, but I think given the connectivity that we have here on the ground with fiber, with these large lines that run all across the U.S. and the world, um, it's unparalleled right now.
Is there a difference in speed with a wireless connection like Starlink as opposed to a wired connection?
Uh, Currently, there is. Your wired connections are always going to be a little bit faster. They're going to be more reliable. Um, but the wireless world is quickly catching up.
Okay. So, I mean, can it miss sometimes? Like if we're uploading or moving tons of data, say we put a data center that orbits the Earth, is there a potential of a miss or somebody else listening into that data?
Oh, I think there's always going to be the risk of that. Absolutely. Um, Whenever we build a good direction from point A to point B, there's always going to be somebody who wants to be that point B to make the data go to point C.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's always going to be that risk.
Yeah. Well, bringing it back down to earth a little bit here, these data centers, they say, well, why do they have to build them on top of the surface? Why don't we just put them under the ground?
That would be an interesting because with all the geothermal stuff that we can do to cool and heat our houses, that would be a very interesting idea. I don't know what kind of process that is, though.
I think it would get into a lot of the cost to excavate that deep into the ground for the size of these buildings seems pretty insurmountable to me. Similar to a moon base type of situation.
I don't think it'd be quite as instrumental as a moon-based thing, but it would definitely, those who are opposed to like the fracking and to all these large excavation sites, it would definitely spark some controversy there.
Yeah, I definitely see the challenge in it. If you look at it from strictly a business perspective, if you're going to build a data center, would I rather dig a massive hole that's going to cost me millions in excavation costs, or if I could just build it right on the surface, why wouldn't I do that?
Well, yeah, take path of least resistance.
Exactly. The other thing that we really haven't talked about is what this water supply issue is. So in Ohio, we have tons of water supply. You think Lake Erie and the Ohio River, and a lot of people are upset about that, and they talk about taking away our drinking water supply. And what is happening there is, again, your path of least resistance. So if you come into a community as a data center and you say, well, I could pull water off of my lake that's here, but I have to then filter it to make sure it doesn't hurt the equipment and all of that. They have to clean that water up. But if there's a municipal water supply nearby, why not just tap into that system? And then I have all of the EPA requirements are taken care of by that. I can just buy it from them, use their drinking water, put it back into their sewage system, and I don't have to have any water plant needs that I have to build out. Because to do it like out in the middle of nowhere where there's no municipal water supply means that I have to build a water plant to satisfy any EPA requirements. So that's why they're going after municipal water supplies because, again, it's cheaper logistics.
Yeah, but then you're pulling from the municipal water supply, like you said, and putting a strain on that resource. So you're either going to have to do it yourself, and so you're not going to make anybody mad, or invest the same amount of money into what already exists to basically double it.
But you still look at the economics of it. It's going to be cheaper for a business to come and say, I'm going to build this massive facility. You've got pipes, you've got staff, you've got all the EPA requirements. I don't have to become a water filtration company. You already have all of that in place. I'm just going to pay you to increase your capacity.
If that's how it works.
Well, it's essentially how it would work rather than having to build your own thing out. Because if you want to build a data center with the EPA requirements on the water to put the water back into the water supply, you have to make sure it's cleaned up. And that requires some type of water filtration, some type of water purification before it's dumped back into the lakes and rivers. And the cheaper way to do that is if there is a municipal water supply nearby, of course you're going to use that.
If it doesn't put too much of a strain on it. I mean, how much water does these facilities bring in and have to ship out to?
That really depends on the size of the data center, of course. Now, I think that's a case-by-case basis. But a lot of communities around Ohio are starting to see massive sewer and water projects being built up because these cities are preparing. Hey, these places are coming in. We want to be competitive to it. We're going to make sure that we can push that much water to them. We can filter more water. We just have to increase our capability for it. And they're saying that it will not affect the water supply. Because when we talk about water supply, there's two different water supplies. There's municipal water supply, that's good, ready to go, EPA approved drinking water supply. And then there's just water out there in the lake. And you just can't go out in the lake and just suck that water out and throw it into the pipes for people to shower and drink tomorrow. It has to be gone through a process. And the data centers also need a certain cleanliness of water. I can't just send water through that's got algae and who knows what other pollutants into it to affect my cooling system.
Right.
So looking at the layman, you work with a lot of the layman people who just use technology on a regular basis. If somebody came to you and said, I don't understand this data center thing, but I think I'm against it, what would you say to them?
I'd ask them why they're against it exactly, because usually it's the power grid issues and things of that nature, and it's okay. I don't really have many answers for numbers on those, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But again, it's like, okay, you're getting in touch with me how? Through email? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, without these data centers, you really don't have that. You're getting in touch with me through some electronic manner. Odds are there's a data center in play there. It's either that, any of your cloud-based stuff, or let's go ahead and host it all right there, and you have to become the expert suddenly. I think that's what a lot of people they're taking it all for granted a little bit.
You live in a rural community, a river town that's been kind of bypassed by the rest of the world now. If you got a data center there, do you think it would improve the quality of life for the residents there?
I think that it would do great things for that area, actually. The area that I live in is, while there's still a fair amount of industry, there's a lot of high poverty levels and everything. And I think having something in that area that would bring in some of these other businesses and create some of these jobs, I think would actually do wonders for it.
Well, some of the data doesn't really show that it produces a lot of long-term jobs. It produces a lot of short-term jobs, but to run a massive data center, and a lot of it's robotically built, robotically managed, less than 10 staff members typically, and usually, highly compensated staff, but that's still not enough to really bring up the poverty levels of a whole community.
I think it brings in other businesses, though. I think having that, and you mentioned, the railways bringing in building these towns essentially around them as access hubs. I think that brings in these somewhat more affluent families that may invest in other ventures at that point. So you have your data center, yes. You have the water supply that needs to be better maintained, better staffed. You have HVAC companies that are suddenly doing great because they're out there working on it, so maybe they're restaffing. I think it brings in a different mindset than what might currently be there. It might be a bit of a settled mindset.
I'm a big proponent of sales tax on the actual services that are hosted by the local data center. So if you think about it now, when you have sales tax and you go to the local convenience store and you purchase, a bag of chips, for instance. Well, a bag of chips is improper. Go and purchase any product that has sales tax on it, and you have to pay sales tax, and that goes back into your local economy for roads and bridges and schools and those types of things. However, the sales tax are worked out. What is not happening with these data centers is they aren't paying sales tax on the services that are hosted within them. We don't know what there's in those data centers. So if that data center makes, $100 million and you were able to tax it at, say, maybe just 3% of that, that would be money that would go back into the local economy. And that's things that nobody is talking about. They're talking about property taxes and how to bill them by property taxes, but there's far more reaching opportunities with sales tax, with data centers. And I think that that is a huge piece that we're missing in the conversation that can really bring the community up. Like I'd say, don't charge them property tax if you can get sales tax out of these data centers, because they can make way more money based upon the services that are hosted on them than anything else.
You're saying something like tax the data.
Tax the data. Tax the data.
Tax the data. New shirt. Tax the data.
Tax the data.
That would be interesting, because you get those people who are very much opposed to property taxes, the things that they own. Well, that's my data in that data center. You're taxing me for my own data, or more of the hosting services that are being taxed?
Exactly. Well, somehow we have to pay for all the infrastructure that is built, whether it's roads, bridges, and you know it from your town of just seeing it fall apart because there is no industry left.
Mm-hmm.
Here's an opportunity to say, yeah, you can build here next to our river. It's an amazing idea, but we need some sales tax revenue from this. We need to bring this up. We just don't want something short term. We want long term. We want to create lasting impact from anything that is built here.
Yep.
And that should be the vision that comes through this stuff.
I agree.
My hot take, do you want to hear my final hot take on this? I think being against data centers is un-American.
I don't know, man. There's two ways to go. Yes, part of it could be we're very forward facing. We're very we want to be the best and push through, and I think that's very data center mindset. There's also my property is my own, and I'm going to sit there and build my own stuff, and nobody can touch it. I don't know which is more American.
Well, the reason I think it's un-American is because America is always moving forward. So if we don't allow data centers to continue to advance, and we say we ban them all and get rid of what we have now, it's going to take us back to an 1850s or lesser era where we don't have the cars and we don't have the electric and diesel trains and we don't have any of the data systems to move us forward. And we will have to have coal-powered everything because none of this other stuff works without that precursor to it. And I think people don't realize, hey, if we got rid of all the data centers, what type of life is really there without of these data centers that are in place today and the type of life that we live? Yeah, we like to make fun of it. Like, I don't need a ChatGPT image, or I don't need, a DoorDash driver. But there's so many other reliant systems now that we've come accustomed to that it would really destroy our way of life to put us into more of a third world style of place. And the other risk is, and where I get to the real un-American part is, when we say no, other countries are going to say yes, and we will no longer be who we are. And I don't think people really realize that. And maybe that's what they want. I just would like them to say that. But I think from a realist standpoint, that is really what we're saying is, if I don't want data centers, I want to be a third world nation.
It's pretty extreme. I think it's definitely it's a gamble to say no. It's a gamble to say yes. But I think you're right. A lot of countries are leaning into this as well. The question is going to be who harnesses it better.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Probably not anybody. We're going to make a lot of mistakes along the way. I'm not sure what the bigger mistake is. Sometimes you don't know what the right decision is. You just know what the next right decision is. And I still think the balanced approach is data center plus environmental responsibility.
I think we're maybe not quickly, but that wonderful movie WALL-E. I think at some point, not in my lifetime, hopefully not in my kid's lifetime, might be a thing of the future.
Yeah, I'm not sure where it goes from here. And I think the discussion has only begun on data centers. No matter what we do, I think they're going to be here. if we do in fact ban them, I'm not sure what life will look like. And I don't even know if that doesn't really matter to me and for our brand here at Astoria. Like, we're not really fearful of that because I think the reality is we don't think it's going to go anywhere anytime fast, or we want to be here.
No, it's not going to go anywhere, but it is here. So understanding how to work with what's going on, how it affects you and your data, that's the conversation to have with your IT professionals.
Absolutely. We appreciate you watching the Hawktail Hour. Today we have Matt Schlief, our Director of Operations, with us. I'm Nate. We'd like you to like and subscribe to all of our social channels, and we thank you for watching today.